So he took the temple, folded it for the tent, and hid it in one of the caves. But when he returned after 3 days to the place, he didn't find the mouth of the cave.
So now it's missing in a cave somewhere.
And well, it sounds like a legend, okay?
Yeah.
It sounds like a legend, but fortunately, Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian, confirmed the story.
Shalom, this is Nehemia Gordon with Hebrew Voices, and today I am on Mount Gerizim with Binyamin Tzedakah. He is the editor of AB, the Samaritan News, and the head of the AB Institute of Samaritan Studies. He's written 107 books and is working on his 108th and 109th books. Shalom, Binyamin.
Not only written, but also published.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Binyamin, you are what Jews would call a Samaritan. Tell us about the Samaritan community and how do you define yourselves? Because Samaritan is a Jewish term for Samaritans. How do Samaritans see themselves?
Well, it's not the way that we see ourselves. We are speaking about facts, okay?
Yeah.
Ancient times, there were no Jews and no Samaritans. All of them were the people of Israel. All of them were Israelites, okay? And this was running through the whole First Temple period until the exiles of those that lived in the south of the country, that later on called Jews, and Jews coming from Judea, the kingdom of Judea, and those that lived in the north of the country, in the kingdom of Israel, and their capital and their main region was Samaria. That's why created the terminology Samaritans. So Samaritans and Jews are actually and originally they are Israelites with different traditions. Our tradition is all around Mount Gerizim, the mountain of blessing that mentioned in the Torah as the chosen place of the Almighty.
And we will get to that because you actually have a different version of the Torah than the Jews.
No, just a minute.
Yeah.
And actually, just in 2008, a professor, James Charlesworth, from the theology seminar of Princeton, he found a fragment from Qumran that's speaking about Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 4 to 6. And there it said in Aramaic script, which we call today Hebrew, okay? He found this verse that's saying that the altar of the Almighty should be built on Mount Gerizim.
And that when you
While
call
in
Gerizim,
the Jewish version, it's written Mount Ebal, which is the mountain of cursing. Mount Gerizim is the mountain of blessing. So it is irrational that the altar of the Almighty will be built on the mountain of cursing. It's more rational that it will be built on the mountain of blessing. So this fragment from Qumran just proved the original text, because I remember when he discovered it and exposed it to the whole people, he asked me, Benny, this is my short name, Benny, would you tell me how it happened that there is such a virgin in Qumran? Qumran is all Jews. How they admit that it should be on Mount Gerizim?
and Gerizim is what Jews call
Of course,
Gerizim.
Jerusalem is not, Jerusalem is not in any regard to the chosen place because it just developed later in the history of the people of Israel from the time of David and Solomon. And we are speaking about the ancient times of the forefathers. So I told him, James, believe me, it's time that we have to stop to blame the Samaritan with any change between the two virgins. Because Jews always claim, in ancient times, claim against the Samaritans that they forged the Jewish texts.
I don't think just in ancient times. And today we say that you falsified the
And
text.
also there are some people that still saying that today. But we are not, the saying, don't confuse me with facts. We prefer to focus on facts, not on how you believe and how you... Facts. So, facts is first. Jerusalem is not mentioned in the 5 books of Moses. Jerusalem was...
it might be mentioned, but...
Just a minute.
Okay.
No. Shalem, it is Salem.
In other words, in Genesis, it mentions a man named Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and you say Salem is a village outside of Shechem, which might actually be correct.
That's called Salem.
Even though most people read that and say it's Jerusalem. Okay, go on.
Jerusalem is only, to say Shalem, that it's Jerusalem, it's only an excuse to tell that Jerusalem mentioned.
Well, no, the understanding of Jerusalem that it's...
But Jerusalem,
city
no
of peace.
doubt that Jerusalem was a very ancient city. Okay? But not ancient Israelite city, but ancient pagan city. That David and Solomon changed it from a pagan city to ancient Israelite cult.
And there's no question that it was captured from the Jebusites by David. No one disputes that.
No question.
Okay.
I'm not telling you from Samaritan sources.
Right.
I'm telling you from the sources that you know.
So let's stop here for a second and back up.
So if we return back to the identity, we are Israelite. The Jews are Israelite. But what differs us one from the other, that we have different Israelite traditions that derived from ancient Israel religion.
That's your perspective. So let's back up a little bit. So you as a Samaritan...
It's not our perspective. This is what really happened.
Well, you say it's a fact, but the facts are in dispute. In other words, according to the Jewish
How
Bible...
you create historical fact? You create a historical based on 3 factors. One, the source of the people that saying the story. Second, the source of other people that confirm what you say about how you see your own history and confirm it. And the third factor, archaeology. Findings that confirmed. So we talk in the last 5 minutes about the 3 factors. How we believe or how it is written in our sources. We said how it is written in Jewish sources, means the Bible, not the 5 books of Moses, but all what coming after it is edited and in Jerusalem, in the Jerusalem temple people. And archaeology. When you have the archaeological proof, there is no any place to say it is not true. When you have these 3 factors.
So let me, as I said, we got to clarify some things. So you've got this priesthood. So in Judaism, in certainly Orthodox Judaism, the rabbis have the authority to interpret Scripture, and if I come along with my own interpretation, the rabbis say it doesn't count. Did the Samaritans have a similar thing of an authoritative
Will you
group?
repeat your question?
My real question is there any group or specific body in the Samaritan community who has the authority to interpret Scripture, the Bible, the Torah, I should say, over those of others? In other words, is it the priests, the Kohanim, or is it tradition?
Well, actually, the priestly family, they are the religious teachers.
They're the authorities.
Yeah, religious authority, but especially the high priest.
Okay.
So we don't have any argument about who giving the religious decision.
Okay.
It is only by the high priest in any time.
Okay.
In any time.
So, for example, if there's a new situation...
But it doesn't mean that others can't just take the book and try to interpret.
They're allowed to do that. Yeah. So, for example, and I don't know the answer to this, but if a new thing...
I myself wrote a complete commentary.
And that's going to be published soon,
of
right?
the Torah.
Your commentary on the Torah.
It's already installed in the internet from Bereshit to the end.
All right, so we're going to post a link to that.
You can find it.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, for example, if a new thing is invented, cell phones, and the high priest decides you're not allowed to use a cell phone on Shabbat, or you are allowed to use a cell phone on Shabbat.
The high priest can't tell me anything to say, that it's not already written in the Torah.
Okay, so how do you deal with a new situation like cell phones?
Why we need religious decision from time to time?
Yeah.
You know, the pace in some Jewish tradition is twice a week, But in our tradition here, Halakhic decision is maybe once in 100 years.
I'm sorry, what's twice a week?
Halakhic decision
Okay. Oh, the
among
pace,
the Jews.
speed. Okay.
The pace.
Okay. Yeah,
They said the pace.
Okay. Yeah.
So when there is confrontation
Yeah.
between the word of the Torah
Yeah.
and the modern technology,
Yeah.
so we need Halakhic decision.
And then the high priest decides.
Only the high priest.
Only the high priest. Okay. Very interesting.
Let me give you one example
Please,
for
yeah.
that. Okay? In 1958,
Yeah.
the incubator was a new invention all over the world, not only in Israel.
The incubator for babies?
For babies.
Okay.
Okay? So it happens that one of the fathers had twins, and they put them in the incubator.
Okay.
At the 8th day, the whole community went to the community of Holon. Just remember, 1958, this is the time when Jordan was here.
So 1948, the community was divided between the Samaritans of Cholon and the Samaritans of Nablus.
Yeah.
And they were reunited in 67. So in Cholon, which was Israel,
the community went to the hospital.
Yeah.
In order to make the circumcision at the 8th day.
Yeah.
And the doctor said, "What are you doing here?" They say, "Oh, doctor, don't worry. It's only 5 minutes and you can take it." He said, "I can't even open the incubator, otherwise they will die."
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we had a problem. And especially in 1958, the Samaritans counted around 300.
300 people in the whole world. Okay.
Now
How many are today?
Now we are 800.
Oh, wow.
So it was for us, it was a reason for celebration, big celebration.
Twins, 2 more people.
And now we have a problem.
That's an increase of almost 1% of the population.
They will not be circumcised at the 8th day. It means they could not be Israelite.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Could not be Hebrew.
And this problem hadn't come up before? Not that you...
Never.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
So, well, I believe that before the incubator, they just died. Okay?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the whole problem was under the decision of the high priest.
Okay.
But the high priest lived in Nablus.
Oh no.
And there was
which was Jordanian occupied territory.
There was international border between us.
Oh wow.
And let's say that Israel was not the cup of tea of the Jordanian at that time.
They were not in good terms. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
But in some way, Jordan was less drastic, less extremist in hatred to Israel than other.
Than the Syrians, for example.
Yeah, Syrians or Egyptians.
At the time, the Israelis referred to the Syrians as the crazies.
So anyway, and there were Samaritans there under Jordan that living in Nablus. And our luck was that King Hussein adopted the community.
Okay. He was the king of Jordan
and
at the time.
Them. Yeah.
Okay.
Had them. He was the king of Jordan. So there was any kind of contact at that time, especially by radio, and we had met once a year for 7 days on the mountain.
So you were allowed to come to Mount Gerizim?
Yes, during Passover.
Even during the Jordanian occupation of Nablus?
Yeah. Except the years of 1966 and 67, that the Jordanians allowed only part of us.
Oh, because the tensions were so high.
Yeah, yes, to cross the border in
so I'm sure you were the only
Mandelbaum Gate in Jerusalem.
You must have been the only Israeli citizens allowed into the kingdom of Jordan at the time.
Yeah,
certainly the only Israelite.
No,
citizens.
but also Christian Arabs.
Yeah, but the only Israelite citizens.
For Christmas.
Okay. Wow.
They could.
Very interesting.
But we were very limited there. In moving.
Yeah.
And we concentrated on the top of the mountain without permission to go down to Nablus.
Okay.
In the contrary to the Christians, that for 3 days they can move anywhere.
Anywhere in Jordan. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but we are speaking now about the circumcision. That
so what happened?
You have to take the halakhic decision during the day.
Yeah.
We were lucky that it was at the time of the second president of Israel, Yitzhak Ben Tzvi, that was like a father to the Samaritan community and adopted her to take care for anything that she needs. And he was involved with building the Samaritan neighborhood in Holon and also building of the first Samaritan synagogue in Israel.
Wow.
So my grandfather, the chief of the community outside Nablus, he called Ben Tzvi and told him, what is the problem? And we don't want to lose two new Israelites of our community.
1% of the Samaritan population. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when we are all
300
only
people.
300 people.
Wow. Okay.
So Ben Tzvi, he had contacts through the Red Cross and United Nations, and they found a way that there was a, like, how you call it, a convention call.
A conference call.
Conference call.
Yeah.
Conference call between Yitzhak Ben Tzvi and the high priest.
Amazing.
In Nablus, and my grandfather.
Wow.
And they spoke.
In Holon. Your grandfather's in Holon. Wow.
And Ben Tzvi took the lead for this and explained to the high priest first. For a long time, he explained him what really means incubator.
Yeah.
Because it was a new invention, a new word.
So in Jordan, they probably don't have incubators at the time. They're so backward.
They also just followed us by a decade, okay?
Okay.
So after the high priest understood that that the incubator just replacing a mother womb, he came to the decision.
Yeah.
That, as Ben Tzvi said, of course, to the heads of the families there in Nablus, he collected them to his house and told them the whole story. So he said, as long as they are in the incubator and the incubator replacing a mother womb, they're still in their mother womb.
Ah, wow.
And when they go out,
yeah,
the community, when they will be released from the
incubator,
yeah, the community should count 8 days and make it at the 8th day.
Wow. So that's an example where the
and
high
it
priest
was a precedent.
made a decision. Okay.
It was a precedent to other cases that happened after.
Okay. Very interesting. Very fascinating stuff. Let me ask
you. So this is an example of confrontation between technology and the word of the Torah.
But the interesting thing is your father...
In the Torah, there is no delay.
Yeah.
You have to do it at the 8th day.
Right.
So we serve the principle of the 8th day, but in other ways.
So your father, who isn't the high priest, he had to defer
to grandfather.
Your grandfather had to defer to the decision of the high priest, which is kind of consistent with Deuteronomy 17.
He was under the decision of the high priest.
So let me ask you some quick questions. Let's go through these. In Judaism, we have this idea of Tzit Tzit, the ritual fringes, and tefillin, the phylacteries. Do you guys have that?
Yeah.
You do have that?
We have Tzit Tzit, and it is 22 bottoms.
22
on
what?
The bottoms.
Buttons?
Yeah.
Oh.
On the upper wing of the talit.
So you... Oh, and
and
buttons.
The other
are they
one...
blue buttons? What color are the buttons?
22.
What color are they?
From the same material of the talit, which is simple white cotton.
So they're not blue. Very interesting. Wow. Okay. And tefillin?
And tefillin, it is...
Phylacteries?
The origin of the tefillin is the story of the Exodus. It comes to serve the whole story of,
But do you have a physical device like Orthodox Jews?
Just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. So it said there in one place, in chapter 13
of Exodus,
Yeah. It said, yes, והיו לאות על ידיך או לטוטפות בין עיניך, ויולות על ידי כל טרטפות בין עיניך. But at the same chapter it said, והיו לאות על ידיך או לזיכרון בין עיניך.
It will be a memory. Okay. Yeah.
It means you have to memorize the commandments of the Almighty.
Okay.
So for us, this is spiritual regard.
Okay.
not physical regard.
Okay, and that's actually something Karaites agree with you on. All right. So milk and meat. We talked a little bit about this before the interview. So can you explain that
Nehemia,
briefly? Yeah.
we are all the people of Israel. It's okay that we think different, but
Yeah.
at the same time,
Absolutely.
this is what given us the argument, given us the adrenaline.
Given what?
The adrenaline.
Adrenaline.
Yes.
Jews like to disagree, for
To
sure.
keep on.
And Israelites, for sure.
To keep on.
So, but you were telling me before that you actually separate meat and milk, and you take it from the verse, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk.
לא תבשל גדי בחלב אמו.
And you take the word kid, the gematria of the word kid, the numerical value of 17,
גדי.
right, to be the 17 types of meat.
And
So-
these are exactly the 17 kinds of meat that mentioned in the Torah that it is permissible to eat.
So, for example, you wouldn't eat beef with cheese.
No.
You do not. Okay.
There
what
is
about
a
chicken?
separation.
What about chicken with
the
cheese?
same.
Same.
This is one of the kind chicken.
Okay.
So-
one of the 17. Okay.
So one of the 17.
Okay.
So all those 17, when you cook them or eat them, you have to make a separation of 6 hours after meat
Yeah.
and 3 hours after milk.
Okay. And that goes back again to the time of Moses, according
Yeah.
to you guys. Okay. All right. You were telling me before you don't call yourselves Samaritans. You call yourself B'nai Yisrael Shamarim,
Or in English, Israelite.
Israelite keepers. And the word, what we say Shomronim, Samaritans,
Shomronim,
you say
they're
is
coming from
Shamarim.
geographical
Okay.
area,
Yeah.
Samaria.
And you, but use the word Shamarim.
Samaria
which
is one of
keepers.
the main region of the land of Israel. And our forefathers lived there. That's why by foreigners, they called Samaritans.
So outsiders call you
And the same with
Shomronim.
Jews. Jews called because their origin is from Judea.
So outsiders call you Samaritans, you call yourselves keepers, Shamarim.
Keepers,
Instead of Shomerim.
Shamarim.
Okay.
Yeah.
So according to Jewish historical sources, the Samaritans at one time had a temple, which was destroyed by John Hyrcanus
We never had a
around the
temple.
year 2128 BC, and you say
We
you never
nev-
had a temple. Okay.
We never had a temple. We had, let's say, sacred site,
Sacred site.
which is the top of the mountains that contain the eternal hill, which is the place where the tabernacle of Moses was there for 260 years.
For 260 years only.
I'm sorry?
It was only on
Only
Mount Gerizim for
260 years.
And what happened after that?
Until it was because of the schism that happened inside the priestly family between Eli, the priest, and the high priest, Azi.
Ozzy.
Yes.
Okay.
So Azi just pushed Eli from the temple, and he went to Shiloh and built there another 10th temple, according to the measurements that mentioned in the book of Exodus. So because of the schism and because the high priest was very afraid that supporters of Eli will come and steal the tent of covenant from
real
Mount
tabernacle.
Gerizim, the temple of Moses. So he took the temple, folded for the tent, and hid it in one of the caves. But when he returned after 3 days to the place, he didn't find the mouth of the cave.
So now it's missing in a cave somewhere.
And well, it sounds like a legend, okay?
yeah.
It sounds like a legend, but fortunately, Josephus Flavius,
Yeah.
the Jewish historian, confirmed the story, and he said that at the year 33 AD, there was a prophet that came to the Samaritans and told them that he is going to show them in which cave on Mount Gerizim the tent of covenant is hidden.
That was 33 AD.
33.
Okay.
And they gathered by tens of thousands only from this,
Yeah.
Just remember, there was no Facebook and there was no
Yeah.
any electronic or radio. Or
They didn't say on Twitter, show up at Mount Gerizim in 5 hours.
Because of this tradition was
Yeah.
very deep
Yeah.
inside the souls of the Samaritans,
Mhm.
many of them came.
Yeah.
And why they came, so many? Because originally this belief is when the tent of covenant, Temple of Moses, will be rediscovered, it means the end of the days comes and there will be a salvation to the whole people of Israel from the pressure of the Romans, okay? Especially the Roman governors that they were very cruel to the Samaritans. So many tens of thousands came to the mountain. It's all written in there in book 18 of Antiquity of the Jews.
Okay.
But Pontius Pilate, that was the Roman governor, this famous Pontius Pilate from the story of Jesus, okay? He translated this gathering as an attempt to rebel against him.
Uh-huh.
So he sent his league and they destroyed the whole assembly, and many of them escaped, many of them killed. So the chance to find where it is hidden just disappeared because the prophet itself escaped.
So there was that's an amazing story, and we're going to post the Josephus passage on
because we know Josephus, his attitude toward Samaritans was
very negative.
All number of cases was very negative.
Very negative, yeah.
So we can take his testimony as truth.
Yeah, it's interesting. He calls the Samaritans at one place the apostates of the Jews and says all kinds of negative things about them. Okay, I want to jump to a couple more questions.
The story is which newspaper you read? The
they say
New York Times or the Washington Post?
They say history is his story. So today, and actually literally today, because it's pre-recorded, you're going to bring the Korban Pesach, the Passover sacrifice, here on Mount Gerizim. Do you bring any other sacrifices throughout the year?
No. Only the Passover, because it's historical, a memory to the Exodus, and this is the only sacrifice that offered by the people of Israel before building or making the tabernacle.
Okay. So
all other sacrifices that mention of the Torah replaced by our high priest by prayers.
Prayers in place of sacrifices. Interesting. Just like the Jewish understanding. Okay. Last question. I hope this is the last.
Don't ever say because you can't say about the origin that he is like others. Others could be like the origin.
Okay, well, you can compare and contrast things.
Okay.
And that's a comparison. Okay. So I've read about this thing called the Avisha or Avisha scroll, which is supposed to, according to Samaritans, have been written at the time of Joshua. Scholars say it's from the 12th to 13th century.
I'm not going, as a scholar, I'm not going...
So you don't make that claim? Okay.
No.
Okay.
I know. Right. No. I can say for sure, this is the most ancient, complete Torah.
Okay.
That it existed today.
Okay.
So there is argument between scholars if this is... So the argument is about its date. So the earliest date by scholars like Moses Gaster, is said that it was 1st century AD. Some they say 13th century AD. It never checked by C14.
Carbon 14.
Yeah, carbon
Why not?
14.
That could be really
First
important.
of all, it's very ancient, and it is kept in a case, wooden case with glass.
Here on Mount Gerizim?
Yes, and in a safe, very heavy
it's a
safe.
good place for it. Okay.
And only once a year we are taking it out.
What day?
Yom Kippur.
Okay. All right. So Jews, of course, have this understanding that there'll be a Mashiach, a Messiah who will come, who will be a descendant of King David.
We call him...
You believe that David was an apostate.
Well, I'm still wondering with so very complicated personality as David was, okay, that you, the Jews, made him as the father of your Messiah.
Yeah, well, he's my ancestor, so I'm biased.
Okay. He has so many bad qualities, I don't know why.
Yeah, so do I, but anyway.
Okay?
Yeah, so you're believing...
Yes, but you never killed anyone.
No, I have not.
You never raped anyone.
Oh, thank God, no.
Okay?
All right.
Okay?
So so your understanding of Mashiach...
You never cheated on your wife when you were married.
Definitely not.
Okay? So David did all of this.
Okay.
And you never assassinated
Uh-huh.
the husband of your future wife,
No, I have not.
like he did with Bathsheba.
I have stepped on some ants, though.
But anyway, if we speak about our tradition, that there will be a returner, that we call him Taheb.
What is...
Taheb,
Yeah.
this is an Aramaic word, means the returner.
Okay.
And it will be a prophet like Moses, that the Torah said, and Moses said to the people of Israel, a prophet like me will appear. Okay? So we believe that he will appear at the end of the days. When will be the end of the days? It could be tomorrow, it could be 10,000 years from now.
But he's definitely not a descendant of David, the Tahib, right?
The time is not the son of David.
Okay. All right.
He
And,
is the
and how do you
son-
spell Tahib?
He is the son of Joseph.
What letters are...
I mean, from the tribe of Joseph.
Interesting. So what are the letters in Tahib? Is that Tav?
Taf Hey Bet.
Okay. Oh, okay. Lashuv in Aramaic. Okay.
Okay.
Tahib. All right. So, all right. Very interesting. All right. I want to, this, I really
I
appreciate-
want to take you
Yeah.
now with me
Yeah.
to see reception in the house of the high priest.
Before we do that, can I ask you to do
Yes,
one
but
thing?
we have to be
that-
there at 10.
Okay.
5 minutes from now.
So this will take 30 seconds, and maybe we'll ask the high priest to do this, but in case he doesn't agree, would you recite for us in your ancient Hebrew, there's the thing in Numbers chapter 6, the Bilkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. Would you recite this in your Hebrew?
ידבר שמע אל מושי לימו, דבר על אהרון ולבנו לימו, כתברכו את בני ישראל. אמר להם, יברכך שמע וישמרך, יאר שמע פנו אילק ויענק, ישע שמע פנו אילק וישם לך שלום. שימו את שמי על בני ישראל, ואני אברכם.
Amen. Thank you so much.
You have been listening to Hebrew Voices with Nehemia Gordon. Thank you for supporting Nehemia's Makor Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at nehemiaswall.com.